Hello, I wanted to take a few minutes and just show you this Barlow Wadley XCR-30 Mark II radio. It's a very unusual radio, and it employed a circuit design by Dr. Trevor Wadley that he developed to try to stabilize the drift that occurred a lot in radios and receivers of that era. Now in today's radios, we use phase lock looping. It's more of a computer design. This was a crystal controlled circuit, and it used a single crystal, but it then did, it used a single crystal for 1,000 kilohertz or 1 megahertz tuning, and then every time you tuned, you'd have to repeak the crystal for that specific band. As you can see in looking at the radio, it has a lot of there's an aluminum front panel which reflects whatever's in the room. Now I'm wearing a brown shirt, so I'll move out of the way here, and you can see the panel change a little bit. It's a very simple radio, but yet in its simplicity, it does a fantastic job. There's a flip chart here that has all the meter bands for shortwave. Beneath this, if one chose to do logging, there's log charts here where you can write frequencies and notes, maybe favorite stations that you want to listen to, and you can see this just flips out of the way so you can pick up the handle and carry it. The front panel layout is such. Over here on the left, we have a 1 megahertz tuner, which then moves this wheel here, this dial, in 1 megahertz increments from 0 up to, I think, 29 or 29, I believe, yes. And then over here, this particular one moves the kilohertz, and so the kilohertz will move from 000 up to 1,000, and consequently you have the 1,000 kilohertz. So what you do is you tune over here, and then you tune this one, and you read across. So right now we are at we're basically locked in the 0 range, so we would be reading this at basically 50 kilohertz is what we would be reading here if we were to read this across. We have an antenna trim, and it's very important to maintain. Radios of that day didn't have automatic matching circuits, and especially in the low frequencies, you would have to move the antenna trim regularly when you go to tune a signal to make sure that you're peaking and getting the maximum sensitivity from the radio. Volume control down here. There's a clarify button which is used for sideband, but I have also found it to work well on AM, where you want to tune slightly maybe to one side or the other to improve fidelity, or in some cases you can avoid a little bit of interference by tuning slightly down or slightly up if there's an adjacent station that's creating some interference. Down here's your mode selector button. You have upper sideband, AM, and lower sideband. Now I do tune from time to time amateur radio signals in here, and that will work fine. But right now it's past 3 o'clock in the morning here in central Pennsylvania, and there is hardly anybody on the air at this hour of the day unless they're international broadcasts. And quite frankly, the whip antenna on this is about maybe 2.5 feet long, and while it's sensitive, it doesn't really do well for the extremely distant weak signals that you find in the amateur radio band. There is a little antenna connector here on this side that isn't on all of these. This might have been a modification because I've seen it on some and not on others, which allows you to connect an outside antenna if you like. This is considered to be a portable radio, and it's fairly heavy. This weighs probably 5-6 pounds, and if you put batteries in, maybe another pound, because it holds 6 D-cell batteries. And you can take this with you if you want in the RV, out on the boat, to the picnic, out to the garden, to the cabin, and it does a very, very nice job with good sensitivity of picking up signals from the AM band up through all of the shortwave and amateur bands. Now, there's one other button here. There's a tuning, there's an S meter here, and then this little button here is your calibration. So ideally, what you do is you would get a time signal or some known frequency of a transmitting station. You would tune to that specific frequency, and then you would move this until you got the signal centered, and then the rest of the band would be all lined up and calibrated for you as you tuned around. So let me turn this on, and I'll show you how this radio works. So you tune it on, and I'm going to turn up here to 1 megahertz. And I'm going to move this antenna trim, and you'll hear it peak. Okay, and then I go back, and I like to re-peak the megahertz. Now I can tune the kilohertz. And again, we're at 3 o'clock in the morning here in central Pennsylvania.
Research. It works for you in 1 hour, not days or weeks. Find out how well Viniprove
Repeat this signal
for free. Call 800-900-10 minutes. In the next 10 minutes for a free sample.
Now that's our local AM station. Operates about 250 watts at night, and it's about 12 miles away. And the signal I can pick up, so I know that broadcasts at 12:30. So I would actually tune this to 12:30 here, and then I would move the calibrator and center it on frequency. And this is how this works on the AM band. Now, on the shortwave band, we can move this on up to, I know that WWCR broadcasts in 4840, so we move it up to the 4 megahertz. Have to move the antenna trim. Turn this up to get a signal here. Okay, I can hear a little band noise. Okay, there is the antenna trim tuned. And now, as I move this up, this is not an active shortwave band except for perhaps this one frequency.
In the last 10 years, have we not had a major action going somewhere?
And I could re-peak the antenna trim, but it's not entirely necessary because the signal is very strong.
China's heading to South America now.
Now, if I moved it up further, up to say 6 megahertz, peak that again, peak this. Now I have to go down because there's nothing really much above 6200. So below 6200, now I'm going to re-peak this. You can hear the band noise coming up.
Volunteered to become my king.
Yes, there isn't much on this time of the night. In fact, I want to try 9 megahertz because sometimes I think it's Radio New Zealand comes in. I'm not sure if we're going to get it tonight or not. It's around 9700, 9710. It may come on at 4 in the morning. I'm trying to remember. Oh, I guess I have to turn up to 700. Yeah, nothing's on right now. It's pretty much a dead band. Down around 3215, WWCR transmits there too. So we'll tune down here.
Where there is
there we go.
road that play echo. So remember this, keep those two in mind now. that these have received the Holy Spirit did not receive the...
And you can see how there's a little bit of hands-on here, where you tune the megahertz, you tune the kilohertz, you peak it with the antenna trim, and you just go back to the megahertz and just make sure that that's peaked as well. This isn't a push-button radio, but it's a lot of fun to operate. Unfortunately, with me tuning here early in the morning and the inactivity of signals really this time of the year, or I'm sorry, this time of the night, you don't get a chance to see how this performs, but it does extremely well. I listened to a lot of different stations on this. I heard Turkey on this the other night. I heard China, although China's a relay. Cuba comes in extremely well here. Romania, I heard Voice of Russia in 9465 this evening using this radio. So it's a wonderful, wonderful little toy. In any event, this particular one, you can see doesn't have much to it. There's a little earphone jack here and an input jack, although I don't know of anybody that operates these off of these radios off of an adapter, because the batteries just last so long and they would pretty much tie you down. And in the back, you take these two screws, open it up, it drops down. The battery tray is in the back lid here. And that's pretty much it. Your antenna's up top here, and then here is the one next to it, an RCA jack if you want to attach an external antenna. This particular one is serial number 11033, which is one of the higher serial numbers that I've seen, and you can see it's in pretty good condition overall. A lot of times these things get banged up, and the aluminum gets scratched, or the knobs get really messed up on it. But this particular one is one of the nicer ones that I have seen. Hope that I've answered some of your questions and that you've enjoyed this.